Today we're heading to a place with a bit of a difficult history. It's a history that I was never taught about in school, and it's a chapter of America that I think we would rather just forget about. I'm on my way to Tule Lake, California, in northeastern California. Not a lot of people get up this way. Now, this van, I travel a lot in it. I like to kind of go side roads, and I like to pull out my camera and make images that help me tell a more complete story. It was the largest of all of the internment camps, and it was the last to close. And there are very specific reasons that we're going to get into. So what I'm going to do is walk around and show you what's here, which isn't a lot, but it has a vibe, it has a feeling that I hope my cinematography will help you pick up on. And we're going to talk about the story of this place, why it was necessary, who was here, why did it become a segregation camp, and why was it the last to close? I'm 62 now. I know it's hard to believe, but as I get older, I get a little bit more curious about places like this. But when I got here, my grand plan took a couple of hits right away. The visitor center is closed today. It's a very small little visitor center. And there are only a couple of buildings here. And so I was kind of challenged. How am I going to tell this story with so little to see? So after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, Americans were shocked, to say the least. And President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, and that got the ball rolling on these internment camps. In total, there were 10 different internment camps, and if I'm not mistaken, well over 100,000 Japanese Americans were placed in these camps. The United States was involved in a world war, and attention was elsewhere. Attention wasn't being focused here. They created this camp, put these people here, and I think most people forgot about it. Out of sight, out of mind. Now, there was no due process. There was no hearing. They rounded you up and they sent you to these places. And while they call them internment camps, in reality, they were prisons. You were here, and this environment was fully military. There were guard towers, there were searchlights, there were tanks and aircraft nearby. I mean, this, for all intensive purposes, was a prisoner camp here in the United States of America. This one was the largest. At its peak, I believe it had 18,000 Japanese Americans here. And here is a really, really remote, really high desert environment. It's hot today. It's June, but I can only imagine how hot this place is in August, September. And it gets cold in the winter. The wind blows in across here, nothing really to stop it, and it's got to be bitter cold. So when this camp opened, it was largely to house Japanese Americans from the Central Valley of California. So in 1943, the U.S. government introduced something called the Loyalty Questionnaire, and it asked two questions that were key. One, do you swear loyalty to the United States of America? And two, if you were called to serve in the military, would you serve? Now, if you answered no to either one of those questions, specifically if you answered no to both of them, they were going to send you here to Tule Lake. And it went from being an internment camp to a segregation camp. The thing to remember about that questionnaire and why people answered no, a lot of people felt it was un-American to be put in that position. Remember, these were American citizens, and to be asked those questions with no due process, no rights of any sort, that was a problem. I think now is a good time to read to you the language on the historical marker. When I read this, it kind of knocked me back on my heels a little bit, and you can draw your own conclusion. There were 110,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, of whom the majority were American citizens. They were placed behind barbed wire and guard towers without charge, trial, or establishment of guilt. These camps are reminders of how racism, economic and political exploitation, and expediency can undermine the constitutional guarantees of United States citizens and aliens alike. May the injustices and humiliation suffered here never recur again. Tule Lake is beautiful in its sparseness. And I was able to kind of begin to just visualize what may have been here. And the fences and the barbed wire and the open space, the wind, the sun, all of these things, kind of coalesced in my head. And I started to paint a picture. And two things happened. One thing was I became excited. I became like, how am I going to tell this story with little to see? I had to rethink that whole kind of paradigm. And I got a little bit sad because the more I thought about this place, the more I had to put myself in it rather than just look at pictures or tour buildings. This is not a pleasant memory as an American that we had these places and this is what we did. Now, I wasn't alive then. I can't imagine what that war effort was like. I give them a pass. But two things can be true at the same time. One, they did what they did, and it was what they had to do at that time. And the other thing is, wasn't really right what they did. And I suppose the thing that really got me is I started thinking about the people, because that's who was here. There were Americans, and they were imprisoned simply for the way that they looked and where they came from. That's a hard thing to wrap my head around today. And it just gives me pause. We can't make that mistake again. So in 1945, after the Japanese surrendered and World War II was over, they started closing all of the internment camps. But they didn't close this one. They still were concerned about the people who were here. They wanted them to take these loyalty oaths. They were trying to strip them from having citizenship. It was kind of a political football at the time. It took, I believe, 6 or 7 months before they finally closed down Tule Lake, and they let all of those people return to their lives. I came to remember what was and to understand a little bit about this chapter in America, something I never learned in school and something I would venture that most Californians and most Americans know little about. This chapter in our shared history, it's worth knowing about, and it's worth understanding what happened, because we don't want that to happen again. And it's not about shaming the past. That's not the point. It's about looking forward. It's about understanding how it happened and what we have to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Democracy, our freedom, habeas corpus, the things that we take for granted, they were taken away from these people with the stroke of a pen. And in today's climate, with what's going on, maybe we should really guard our freedom, guard the freedom of others, and remember how special it is to be an American and a citizen of the United States of America. That's my walk away, I guess, today. And I'm just really grateful that you came with me, and I hope you enjoyed the story of Tule Lake.